5 Live Formula One.
Afternoon, everyone, and welcome to coverage of round 4 of the 2025 Formula One World Championship. We're in Bahrain, in the middle of the desert. On the site of a former camel farm lies this 5.4-kilometre Bahrain International Circuit. The sun has set, the sky has turned a dark shade of blue as the floodlights illuminate the 15 turns that the 20 drivers are about to navigate in search for the fastest lap possible. We're about to go qualifying for the Bahrain Grand Prix, and guiding you through this one is myself, Harry Benjamin. Alongside me is the former McLaren mechanic Mark Priestley and the BBC's F1 correspondent Andrew Benson. And Mark, we want people to stay listening to this one, but McLaren do have the advantage, and it looks to be quite considerable.
Yeah, a pretty considerable advantage. I think that's a fair way to describe it. Definitely stay listening, because what we definitely don't know at this point is which way between those two McLarens it's going to go. There could still be a challenge from outside. We've seen Max Verstappen and Red Bull take big leaps between the practice sessions and qualifying when it really matters. That's one of the little bits of Verstappen magic that we so often see, where he's able to turn it on under pressure. So have the Red Bull team been able to find anything? Because this morning or earlier on today, they really were struggling in that car to come anywhere close to the McLarens, as was everybody else.
Andrew, half a second clear with the McLarens at the end of FP2. Piastri actually had 6/10 over Norris at the end of FP3. Why does it seem like McLaren are so much further ahead than the rest of the field compared to the previous 3 races?
Well, it's kind of counterintuitive, because their car's actually better compared to the others in medium and high-speed corners generally, not slow corners, and Bahrain doesn't have that many medium and high-speed corners. There are a couple of the sort of S-bends between turns 4 and 8, and then turn 11 and 12, obviously, but it's all to do with tyre temperature, Harry. Bahrain is the toughest circuit on tyres in terms of temperature all year, not in terms of the demand laterally from side to side. That will be Suzuka, Spa and Silverstone for that. But here in Bahrain, the tarmac is really rough, and that really overheats the tyres. Of course, the tarmac's also hot because it's in the desert in the Middle East, and the McLaren has the best tyre management capacity as a car. So when they're going through the middle sector where all the corners are, basically they're keeping their tyres in the right temperature better than everybody else, and therefore they're able to extract the most from the car more than everybody else, and therefore their natural advantage, which they've already got, which is probably like a tenth maybe on a lap, it gets magnified.
Well, let's see how much the gap is come the end of Q1. That'll be the first session underway, where we'll eliminate the slowest 5 drivers. I'll tell you what, Mark, something prevalent in FP3. Although we said the conditions are different, it's in the heat of the day for a start. Now it is night time, and the sun has set. The wind hasn't died down.
No, it's picked up about twice as fast as it was for the practice session earlier, in the same direction. So they will get a tailwind coming down the back straight into sort of turn 11, which caught a couple of drivers out earlier on, and with that now being even stronger, that's definitely going to be something to watch out for. One thing I would say is that if you think back to the eras of dominance of Max Verstappen, there was no challenge not only from anyone outside their team, but he didn't really have a challenge from his teammate either, which means that on a time like qualifying, he was able to drive within his own limits to minimise the need, any risk of mistakes. What McLaren don't have is that luxury on either side of the garage, because both of those drivers are desperate to be in front, and therefore they're going to push each other. So they are going to be on the absolute ragged edge. Even if their car has an advantage over everyone else, they're going to be pushing to the limit, and that's what we want to see.
Well, let's take you through how the championship standings lie before we get the cars on track for the first part of qualifying. In the Drivers' Championship, it is Lando Norris who leads, only by 1 point ahead of Max Verstappen. Then it's Oscar Piastri third, with the 2 Mercedes drivers, George Russell and Kimi Antonelli, rounding out the top 5. First of the Ferraris is Charles Leclerc in 6th. Then it's actually Alex Albon in 7th for Williams, ahead of Lewis Hamilton, who rounds out the top 8. Over in the Constructors' Championship, it's McLaren, the reigning champions, who have a 36-point advantage over nearest rivals Mercedes. Follow that by Red Bull in 3rd. Ferrari and Williams round out the top 5, with Haas in 6th ahead of Aston Martin. Racing Bulls are 8th ahead of Sauber, and Alpine 10th and last, the only team yet to get off the mark. They'll be looking to try and get some points in tomorrow's Grand Prix in Bahrain. Okay, behind McLaren then, who might be the disruptor? Because so far, while we look to the Red Bulls, we look to the Ferraris, it's actually the Mercedes of George Russell who looks like he has been the closest to get to the McLarens.
Yeah, I think that's fair. I think, you know, George has been able to seemingly get the best out of that Mercedes so far, as in pushing the car to the absolute limit, extracting almost everything that seems available. That's what it looks like, which is exactly what you want from your driver. His young teammate Kimi Antonelli not been too far behind him, so a really good showing from him too. So that car seems like it's very drivable, very driver friendly in many regards, but just doesn't have the outright pace. And what Andrew was talking about, McLaren's advantage with tyres and keeping tyre temperature under control, for all of those other cars and drivers that don't have that luxury, they're having to really think carefully and manage how they drive the car to not overheat, particularly the rear tyres on a circuit where there are lots of slow braking zones onto long straights. And what happens when you come out of a slow corner and need to get the power down, the temptation is to put a huge amount of load, even spin the rear wheels up. When that happens on this abrasive surface, the surface temperature just spikes. And at that point, the surface almost becomes molten. It loses all of its grip, it overheats, and you carry that with you through the rest of the lap. So they're having to drive to a compromise, whereas McLaren are able to push a lot harder and more consistently over the entire lap.
Yeah, and a lot of the cars struggling with grip throughout the course of the practice sessions so far. First cars, though, out on track for Q1, underway. 16 minutes and 40 seconds remain as it's the two Aston Martins of Fernando Alonso and Lance Stroll who are heading the only three cars that are out on track at the moment, with Nico Hülkenberg, Sauber back out on track. Now, Hülkenberg actually had to stop his car in the final half an hour of free practice 3. That Sauber kicking into anti-stall, seemingly with a surprise to the Hulk at least. He had to pull off the track, and that was the end of his session. So Sauber working hard to get that fixed, and he's back out onto the track in that fluoro green and black Sauber. He's just making his way down the back straight now, finishing his out lap to gear up to what should be his first flying lap. The German driver who debuted in Formula One at this very circuit 15 years ago. How time flies as he heads towards the start-finish straight. The DRS line approaches, the rear wing flies open, and Hülkenberg sets himself the task of navigating turn 1, slamming on the brakes just before the 50-meter braking board, down through the gears into the right-hander. Then before you know it, it's a slight left-hand flick into turn 2 as you rise up the hill, take a bit of curb on the inside before running out wide towards turn 4. Try and widen the corner as best you can, taking over the exit curbs as you sling the car in through the right-hand side, running out wide, but crucially keeping all four wheels the right side of the white line as you then come through the sweepers, first to the right, then to the left, which takes you downhill, once again down through the gears, into the right-hander of turn 8, rising up once more over the crest as you get to a really technical part of the circuit, a never-ending left-hander of turns 9 and 10, when the apex comes at you quickly, a tight turn, wanting to get as much grip out of the corner as possible before you hit the DRS button once more, down the middle straight towards the left-hander of turn 11, where we've seen a lot of cars being affected by the wind. Uphill we go, through the fastest corner on the circuit, north of 240 kilometers an hour, sparks flying from the underside of that Sauber, fastest so far in the middle sector. Only Alonso and Stroll on quick laps at the moment to compare. Just the back straight to go then for Nico Hülkenberg's first lap out on the track. Final two corners to navigate. First turn 14, then it's a slight flat out right hand kink of 15 to the line then for the German on the soft tyre, and his opening gambit sees him 7.5 tenths clear of Lance Stroll. 1:32.8 from the Hulk.
Well, it was a nice tidy lap from Hulk, but not fast enough, and that's going to be their problem. It's one of these circuits that really tempts you to drag the car out wide. The walls are a long way from the edge of the circuit in most parts, and lots of runoff area, and that means you're tempted as a driver to push to and over beyond those limits. Keeping within the white lines and keeping within track limits is definitely going to be a feature. And there's a couple of points on the circuit that really encourage you to lock your brakes, some really big stops, one or two of those where you're turning and braking at the same time. So there's a number of good challenges around here, also a number of overtaking opportunities, 3 DRS zones as well when it comes to race day. So this is a circuit that should provide much more of a spectacle than we saw last time out just a week ago over in Japan.
Starting to get busier on track now, 13 minutes and 20 seconds remain, and I tell you what, Esteban Ocon perhaps looking slightly concerned in the Haas garage, as it looks like they were changing the seat and trying to put a new mould of that seat into the cockpit of his Haas Formula One car, with Esteban Ocon just standing there while his car is shrouded by engineers and mechanics. And well, they were towards the back at the end of free practice 3, so this will be a crucial session for Esteban Ocon to try and fight his Haas car up into the next stage of qualifying in the next 12 minutes and 48 seconds.
So now we've got Verstappen starting his first flying lap with the soft red wall tyres on again. So this is the first opportunity to see what the car feels like in these conditions. Practice earlier on today was done in the real heat of the day, and that can really transform the way the car behaves. So Max Verstappen now barreling into turn 4, nice and tidy, hits the apex, runs actually just over the track limits. I suspect that was. It was very, very close, but he's still got the car under control, still delivering. He's going faster than anyone else so far as he comes down into turn 8. The big right-hander, very easy to run wide, but he keeps it just within track limits and heads down towards the very tricky left-hand braking and turning section of 9 and 10 before getting onto that back straight.
We're going to get a really good comparison between the two Red Bull drivers, because Yuki Tsunoda is also on his first flying lap on the soft tyre. He's about 20 thousandths of a second slower than Alonso in the first sector, whereas Verstappen is up on Alonso's fastest time. That's only 2 times set so far. We did have Stroll, but he did exceed track limits, so Lance Stroll's lap was deleted. He shall have to go again. Verstappen once again up on Alonso in the middle sector, only by half a tenth of a second though.
Yeah, we might find that Verstappen also exceeded track limits. It looked mighty close, but look, Tsunoda, big lock-up from Verstappen, and he goes wide, so that is his lap ruined anyway. The stewards won't need to get involved in that one. I think he's going to abort it himself, and back into the pit lane he goes.
But Tsunoda, fastest in the middle sector, just one more corner to go for the Japanese driver in his second qualifying for Red Bull, and it was all looking so good, but through the final corner, the curb just dragging him out wide, and while he goes to the top of the times, he did run all 4 wheels off the track coming out of turn 15. It's a 1:32.096. Let's see if he keeps that lap time. 10 minutes and 57 seconds left.
Yeah, it looks from the view that we got from the onboard camera, the front wheels certainly both well outside of the white lines, and there he goes, had his lap time. Has he? No, he hasn't yet. Not yet, as for Tsunoda, but it did look like it was all 4 wheels outside the white line. We're getting a replay of Verstappen, who, locked up and missed the apex of turn 14.
Something really wrong with the car.
That's Verstappen saying there's something really wrong with the car. He was heading towards turn 14, front left locked up, that sent him wide, and then he immediately bailed on the lap. Despair for the Red Bull fans in the grandstand, getting a good view of that one. Jack Doohan is currently the fastest driver on the circuit, a 1:31.9 from the Alpine, the Australian rookie. Then it's Tsunoda, still holding on to that lap time. No, it's about to be deleted. So Sainz is up there, along with Gasly, Alonso, Lawson, Behrman, Hadjar and Hulkenberg, the drivers to have set lap times. The 2 Ferrari cars are out on the track at the moment. A new floor being brought forward, introduced to that car this weekend, and it's Charles Leclerc who's currently fastest of anybody in the first sector. He's looked quicker than Hamilton so far this weekend, but Lewis Hamilton is the most successful man around this circuit. 5 wins to his name, along with 11 podium places. What can Hamilton muster up inside that Ferrari? His first lap time on the board as he crosses the line is enough for second fastest, half a tenth behind Jack Doohan's Alpine. Charles Leclerc, though, looking much quicker. He's 4 tenths up in the middle sector.
Yeah, that's not good enough for Hamilton. We'll see what happens. We haven't seen the entirety of his lap, but to be behind Doohan on the same tyre at the same time on track is definitely not good enough in a Ferrari. Leclerc, though, comes through the final turn 15, a little twitch of the steering wheel, a little bit snappy on exit, but he's got his foot buried, comes to the line now, and that is good enough to be fastest by 4.5 tenths.
Piastri and Lando Norris, the ones to beat. That's what we're predicting. They have looked mighty so far throughout the practice sessions here in Bahrain. They've topped every single one with either car, and to the line first will be Oscar Piastri, who goes to the top by 62 thousandths of a second. Piastri takes that P1 position, but Lando Norris is quicker than his teammate in the middle sector. What's it going to be across the line? And almost 3 tenths up. Norris takes that P1 spot, but this is Q1. We're looking to eliminate the slowest 5 drivers come the end of the next 8.5 minutes, and we're still waiting for the 2 Mercedes, the 2 Red Bulls. Ocon Ocon in the Haas and Stroll in the Aston Martin to set representative times.
And just thinking about Max Verstappen's issue, he aborted his lap when he went into turn 14, locked. It was the left front tyre that he locked, which is the outside tyre, just at the point where he began to turn in. That's unusual because it's normally the unloaded tyre that it locks up, if anything, and it seemed like that was the loaded tyre. I mean, he said the car feels terrible, something's terribly wrong, and he then abandoned that lap. So I wonder if they've made some changes over the lunch break and there is something slightly amiss, because that seemed like a slightly strange dynamic, not something you'd normally see going into that corner.
Two Mercedes drivers have now set lap times. Antonelli up to 4th, and George Russell, who's looked best of the rest behind McLaren so far, not the opening lap he would be happy with. He's 8/10 down in 7th position.
And what's interesting, Fernando Alonso has just popped up to 5th in the Aston Martin. That's on his second set of new tyres already, and there's still 7 minutes of this session to go, so he's getting through tyres quite quickly, Fernando Alonso in the Aston Martin. I suspect he doesn't expect he's going to be progressing to Q3, so maybe he's thinking, well, I might as well just go for it and do as best I can.
Try and secure as good a position in this session, get through to Q2 and see where he lies, because the Aston Martins don't look like they've got the pace to be challenging in the higher echelons of the grid. It's Norris at 1:31.1 currently fastest, 7 minutes left on the clock. Piastri, Leclerc, Antonelli, Alonso is 5th, Doohan, Russell, Hamilton, Sainz, Gasly the top 10.
Despite that, Alonso is still splitting the Mercedes drivers and ahead of Lewis Hamilton.
It's a good lap.
Even though it's his second set of tyres, it's still impressive for an Aston Martin.
It's also a really good lap from Jack Doohan, which was comparable to a number of those drivers around him in terms of the time that it was set. They're all on the soft tyre, of course, and that's a really solid lap, way ahead of his own teammate Pierre Gasly. A long way to go, of course, but that's done him no harm.
The two Red Bull drivers are still in the pits, and I do wonder, are they, especially for Tsunoda's sake, leaving it a little close to the bone? Tsunoda had his lap time deleted for exceeding track limits, and Verstappen, well, he would have gone that way as well had he not ran completely off the track and decided to bail out of his first flying lap and come into the pits. They're the only two drivers yet to set a lap time. At risk is Lance Stroll in 16th. Isaac Hadjar, curiously, down in 17th. He's looked quick in that Racing Bulls. And Gabriel Bortoleto is in 18th, followed by the two Red Bull drivers. Standouts so far have to be, I think, Fernando Alonso up in 5th. Jack Doohan in the Alpine, quite a way ahead of his teammate in 6th. And also, if we have a look at perhaps the likes of the Sauber of Nico Hülkenberg up in the top 10 as it currently stands. He's actually looked fairly quick all weekend so far, has Hülkenberg. So we know what he's like over one lap. He could pull something special out of that Sauber.
Yeah, that's a good start for some of those. I can tell you from experience, and we mentioned it in the practice sessions earlier on, that the change in conditions between practice and now can easily just knock you off course in terms of engineering that car. So whatever the driver feels in practice, which might either be good or bad, you can make decisions based on that feeling, which then completely shifts as the conditions and the temperature drops going into the evening session where we are now. So this is the first time you're going to get the chance to drive the car having made any changes, and now of course the cars are locked in Parc Fermé. There are very few changes you can make from here on in.
So right now it's all quiet on track, but in the last couple of minutes it's been busy, and Verstappen and Tsunoda are just kind of sat in their garages. What are Red Bull waiting for? Well,
you're only going to get one more run, really. So with Verstappen, this is a fine strategy. You don't worry about Verstappen. The pressure's not going to get to him. He typically doesn't make many mistakes. So if they've not found a problem with the car and they're just now waiting for what they deem to be the perfect time on track, that's fine. With Tsunoda, though, you feel like you'd want to give him, a couple of runs at this should he need it. He's not been comfortable. He's not been consistent enough. So it feels like a high-risk strategy, certainly on the side of the garage for Yuki Tsunoda.
Let's see, we're about to get an absolute influx onto the Bahrain International Circuit, lit up by the floodlights as the sun has well and truly set and the night sky overlooks the 20 Grand Prix drivers still in this one. We're coming to the close of the first part of qualifying with 4 minutes left on the clock, and at the end of these 4 minutes, the slowest 5 drivers will be eliminated. Right now in that zone is Stroll, Hadjar, Bortoleto, and the 2 Red Bull cars under pressure, having had their lap times deleted in the first flying runs for Tsunoda, and Verstappen running out wide and bailing out of his quick run. To no surprise, it's the 2 McLarens who had the edge of the field. It's Lando Norris ahead of Oscar Piastri, with Charles Leclerc now the closest to get to them in the Ferrari. Antonelli and Alonso round out the top 5. Good laps as as well in the early stages for the likes of the Alpine of Jack Doohan and Sauber's Nico Hulkenberg up in the top 10. But we know how tight that middle section is on the that midfield is on the circuit in the field. So even the smallest half a thousandth of a second can lose you 3 spots these days.
Yeah, it really is that close, and actually all the way from behind the McLarens right down to the back end of the midfield, it's really very close. It looks like the sort of Ferrari of Leclerc and then the 2 Mercedes probably the next best 3 cars, but actually really not a lot in it. So you're right, tiny changes, tiny improvements, tiny little bit more risk taken, pushing a little tiny bit further, just having a tiny bit more confidence. Those tiny little things can make a big difference to where you sit in the table. And when you're down the back end of this towards the sort of P15, P16, that can determine whether or not you sail through into the next part of qualifying or not.
Ollie Behrman is right on the bubble at the moment. He is in 15th spot and going on his final flyer now. Ollie Behrman, who managed to run a magnificent race last time out in Japan, getting points on the board in a Haas that looked like it would be a tough contender to score points.
Pretty sure he just crossed all 4 wheels over the white line again, Behrman, and he's locked a tyre as well, so this is not looking good for him.
No, not for Ollie Behrman, who has got previous race experience here in Formula 3 and Formula 2. Finished on the podium here back in his F3 days, getting on the throttle on the exit of turn 10. But will this lap time be deleted? We'll have to wait and see what pops up on the race control board with his teammate Esteban Ocon. Despite a bit of a hurried start, a bit of a delayed start for Ocon with a seat change by the looks of things, is currently up there in 9th. He is out in the field once again. We have got the 2 Red Bulls, though, out on track on their outlaps at the moment. It really will be last across the line for the 2 Red Bull drivers.
And Verstappen is in amongst traffic. He's sort of tucked up behind Piastri and Bortoleto on the circuit. He's trying to make some space now. He's got Stroll behind him bunched up. He's looking for a gap too. So it's a case of fighting it out to get the bit of circuit. Stroll's just overtaken him, in fact. So Verstappen going to have to really back off. He should be okay. He'll be okay time-wise, but he's got to find a clear part on the track to be able to really go for it on this one and only lap that he's got to find his way into the next part of qualifying.
Bortoleto gets that Sauber up into 12th spot, and equally for Tsunoda, he's not found himself a good part. He's got Carlos Sainz, I think, in front of him, and George Russell's not too far behind him, along with Norris, Albon, Alonso. There's a whole gaggle right behind Tsunoda. Isaac Hadjar with a phenomenal lap in the closing stages gets that Racing Bulls up into the top 5. Is that showing, though, a bit of track evolution that we're getting here right in the closing stages?
Yeah, so those that were at the front, even including the 2 McLarens, who you could think of would be sitting quite pretty in the garage and not even needed to come back out again, are now back on the circuit, probably just in case they need to deliver another lap. I don't think they're going to, because I don't think anyone's going to trouble them, but you're right, the circuit getting faster and faster and faster, and now we've got the 2 Red Bulls on their flying laps.
And Gasly is half a tenth up on Lando Norris in the first sector, looking good. We'll see what the split is for Tsunoda in a few moments' time. The 2 Alpines looking quick. Gasly's up to 6th. Jack Doohan is up to 3rd. Impressive from the Australian. Tsunoda is just under a 10th down on Lando Norris, but so far enough to get him up into Q2. Can he hold that pace? Liam Lawson crosses the line, and the Racing Bulls takes the checkered flag in 14th spot. Not safe. He's got Bortoleto behind him, though. Stroll, Behrman, Albon, and the 2 Red Bulls are all at risk of being eliminated from this first part of qualifying. Hamilton rockets up in his Ferrari up into 2nd. How much are we seeing increased grip, increased evolution of this track as we get more and more rubber laid down? So much has been made of the lack of grip so far this weekend, but under the lights, slightly cooler temperatures, and we're seeing these cars dance under the lights. It's Verstappen who will come across the line before his teammate Tsunoda. One final corner to go for Verstappen to the line, currently down in the bottom drop zone, but he puts himself up into 3rd. The crucial question will be, is can his teammate join him? Yuki Tsunoda, who made it through into Q2 last time out on debut for Red Bull. Can he follow that up this time? He can, up into 11th, but he's still 6 tenths off the pace compared to Max Verstappen, who's 2 tenths off the pace.
Yeah, a decent-ish lap from Tsunoda, but it's not going to be enough really to keep the higher-ups at Red Bull particularly happy, but it will see him through into the next part. He seemed to lose a lot of time in the middle sector after a very good first opening sector of the lap, so better from Tsunoda.
He could still be in trouble. I think he'll get away with it though, will Tsunoda, because there was a lot of change right at the end. Hulkenberg gets through into Q2, so too does Esteban Ocon. He's up there in 12th, and that will be it for Q1. Alex Albon, his first Q1 elimination of the season in that Williams. He's out in 16th and out-qualified by Carlos Sainz for the first time this year. Liam Lawson, it's another Q1 elimination for the Kiwi now in the Racing Bulls. Gabriel Bortoleto 18th, Lance Stroll in 19th, and it hasn't worked out for Ollie Behrman, 20th and last in the Haas. And that only left Tsunoda 14th. So he was close.
He got away with it just about, but yeah, as I said earlier, not a good enough lap really. He's got to be able to build up, and if he can continue to build, if he can build his confidence, along with that will come the lap time. Really disappointing for Albon to be knocked out when Carlos Sainz goes through, but also for Liam Lawson when Hajar, his teammate, up in P10, so really good from him.
Sorry guys, but I don't really.
That was Alex Albon. Clearly not happy with what's been going on in that session inside the Williams cockpit. So out goes Albon in 16th, Lawson 17th, Bortoleto 18th, Stroll 19th, and Ollie Behrman 20th. I'll tell you what, impressive from the Alpines.
I was just about to say, I think it's the temperature shift between, you know, afternoon session as to now in the evening seems to have really favoured them, and that's what can happen. As I was saying earlier on, it can make a big difference to how a car that underperforms in one of those sets of conditions can be completely different and transformed in another. For McLaren, it looks like they have still got an advantage. Nothing like the early advantage we saw in practice earlier on though.
We had a problem with DRS there.
No way, mate.
And we're checking what happened there. They opened, then it closed again.
I opened it. I didn't close it.
Yeah, copy. We see it. We just need to understand what happened.
Oh my god, man.
And we are P17. We think the lift-off has sent the system into passive and then it closed.
So a DRS problem then for Liam Lawson. Looks like that's seen him out in Q1. DRS can give you around about a 6/10 of a second gain on, well, 3 straights here. The start-finish straight, then you've got the run up to turn 4, and then the back straight between turns 10 and 11. So clearly Lawson frustrated there as his teammates sailed on through.
Well, yeah, the engineer was talking about the lift-off, sending the system into passive, and what he means by that is if he lifted off the throttle, which would be a strange thing to do down the straight, so unless his foot slipped off the pedal or something like that, but there seems like there was a lift off the pedal, which then convinced the DRS system they were coming towards a braking zone, then it went into passive mode and closed itself. But as you say, the actual effect down some of these long straights is really quite significant around this track. So if something like that's happened, and clearly something's happened to close that flap on the rear wing, it's cost him dearly.
Well, just a reminder then of who's out after the first part of qualifying. Alex Albon in 16th. That will be his lowest ever start in Bahrain. He was one of 7 drivers to reach Q3 at every race this season. That has now come to an end. Liam Lawson is out in Q1 for the 3rd time in 4 races this season. Then comes Gabriel Bortoleto in 18th spot. That's his 3rd consecutive Q1 elimination. Out qualified by teammate Nico Hulkenberg. Lance Stroll, well, he was last in Japan. That's one improvement for the Canadian this time around, up to P19 and struggling in that Aston Martin. And Ollie Behrman, the slowest qualifier in Bahrain, having reached the heady heights of Q3 last week in Japan, will have a little bit more overtaking to do. There is pace in that car. It's Esteban Ocon up in 12th at the end of that session. So work to do then for the likes of Yuki Tsunoda in the Red Bull. Can he close the gap? About 4/10 off his teammate Verstappen at the end of the first running in Q1, which is, well, what we've kind of seen as a regular habit from the Red Bull drivers. But unfortunately, in this instance, that's the difference between 3rd place and 14th.
Yeah, big difference, small time differences, big differences in the table. But just looking at Verstappen's lap, it seemed like that wasn't the best of Verstappen either. It felt like, because it was the last run and it was his one opportunity, it felt a little bit like Verstappen wasn't quite on the ragged edge. It's almost like he was playing it safe, and that was enough to get him third on the current order. So there is pace in that Red Bull Racing car. It's just about unlocking it at the right moment, and if anyone can do that, it's almost always Max Verstappen.
Just seeing a couple of replays as well where it went wrong for some of the drivers knocked out. Liam Lawson's DRS did open and then close again, so clearly losing time there with perhaps a technical fault on board his Racing Bulls. And Alex Albon just looking like he didn't quite have it hooked up in his Williams. First time though out qualified by Carlos Sainz this year. So Sainz, who looked rather ominous in that Williams in Bahrain pre-season testing, was looking forward to coming back here and finding that sweet spot in the setup again, and it seems to be going well for the Spaniards so far.
Yeah, and actually if you look at the order that we've got, it's almost sort of inverse to the way you'd imagine it when it comes to look at the teammate battles. So Doohan ahead of Gasly, Hamilton ahead of Leclerc, which has not been the case so far this weekend, Antonelli well ahead of Russell, and Sainz ahead of Albon. So it's a little bit topsy-turvy.
Well, the Ferrari team, only Hamilton did 2 runs in that session, so that would explain why he's ahead of Leclerc. And of course the McLarens only did 1 run too. But the Alpines are the ones that really stand out, I think, from that first session, aren't they? Particularly Jack Doohan. He's had a pretty torrid time, but in between the accidents, there's been flashes of really good pace. He's under a lot of pressure because there's a lot of speculation about how long he's going to keep that seat. So, you know, fair play to him. He's done a really good job. This is, a track that he knows. I think it's the first track that Jack Doohan's been to that he's this year in Formula 1 that he's raced on before. So he's really sort of sent a marker out there to Flavio Briatore, the executive advisor at Alpine, who's going to decide on his future, to say, look, take me seriously. Yeah,
the best qualifying for an Alpine driver so far this year has been 9th for Pierre Gasly, and that was all the way back in Australia, so it hasn't been their strong suit so far, but such are the margins in that Formula 1 midfield at the moment. And Gasly has good memories here from his Toro Rosso days, qualifying 5th in a Toro Rosso back in 2018, following that up with a race run to 4th place. Last year though, it'll be one for Alpine to forget, qualified right at the back and raced his way to 18th, whereas you're right, Andrew, Jack has raced here before in more recent machinery than he ever has done in the previous circuits we've been at, racing in Formula 2 here a couple of years ago. So hoping that rebuilds his confidence, as he's been showing some promising bits of pace, and so far has had a good start to qualifying as we get underway then for Q2. Green light on at the end of the pit lane, 13 minutes and 10 seconds remain as we once again eliminate the slowest 5 drivers qualifying to try and get themselves into the top 10 shootout.
Yeah, so one of the big advantages that having a fast car that McLaren have in this session is that they, as you saw last time out, only need to do 1 run. It could well be the same again this session. 1 good solid run with the pace advantage they have could just see them through into the final part of qualifying, in which case they can save tyres, and if they should need them in Q3, if there is a challenge coming from somewhere, they'll have more tyres than anyone else to throw at the problem. So there are so many things that work in your favour when you have a car that's as good and drivable and reliable as the one that they have.
Soft tyres, once again the order of the day. Pirelli bringing the hardest tyres in the range for this weekend to deal with that abrasive track surface. The original tarmac being laid down in 2003. So the likes of Kimi Antonelli and Ollie Behrman, they're younger than the actual tarmac that is on the ground here. So will that aid them? We shall see. Cars on track then, including Kimi Antonelli, who was looked much more comfortable here than he did last week in Japan, and actually had to take quite a lot of learnings from the team's reserve driver Valtteri Bottas. And that's the noise coming out of Mercedes at the moment about Antonelli. He's very good with his technical feedback, but also he's very eager to learn and happy to get advice from the likes of Valtteri Bottas, of course, who is a quick driver and a seasoned veteran.
Yeah, he feels like the sort of dream, somebody that's young enough and impressionable enough that you can mould around the sort of brand and the partnerships that you have with Mercedes. He feels like he'll very much fit into all of that side. He's enthusiastic enough that he'll kind of do anything you ask him at this point. And importantly, in the car, he's not really making mistakes. He's building gradually, getting better and better and better. Really solid performances. He's not seemingly sort of phased by very much that's been thrown at him in his very short Formula One career. So a promising start to what I suspect is a big career.
Oh, and we've got a car off track, and it's a big incident. Red flag, and it's the Haas of Esteban Ocon, and the rear end of that Haas completely destroyed. He said he is okay, and that looks like it's coming out of turn 3, just on the exits. What has happened? He's gone into the gravel and hit the wall hard. As Tsunoda was putting in a purple sector, he will have to come to a slow, as will everybody else, back into the pits.
So it looks like an easy part of the track, that, but it's not. Turn 2 looks like it should be flat, but quite often you have to feather the throttle there. I suspect what Ocon's done is gone too hard through turn 2, taken just too much throttle through there, lost the rear and smashed into the barriers on the outside.
The medical car there straight away. Ocon has said he is okay. He's moving in the cockpit, the steering wheel. He's just trying to feather it through the halo to
There's a lot of damage to that car. It's gone in. It's seemingly gone in fast. We haven't seen a replay yet, but it's gone in with the rear end, and it really has destroyed the back end, the gearbox. There's a lot of work in rebuilding that before tomorrow.
It's a shame because he did a good job to get himself through into Q2, whereas his teammate Behrman is 20th and last. There's a new flaw on that car as well, having brought that in last week in Japan. And Ocon had actually been hoping to have a good run here at the moment. I wonder, we know that car suffers in the high-speed corners.
And with the bumps as well.
Yeah, let's hear it. He was complaining about the bumps earlier. So into the right-hander of turn 1, then he flicks it into the left-hander of 2. Let's listen. He runs out wide on the curbs and just loses the car.
Yeah, it bottomed out. He went over the curb, which I do all the time in the game.
I thought you could do that all the time on the road.
Yeah, you run out over that curb, and because the bottom of the car bottoms out, here he is.
Are you okay?
Yeah, I'm okay, sorry. I'm really sorry, guys.
It's okay. You're okay, so that's good.
Yeah, so that is the most important thing, of course, that he's absolutely fine. But when the car bottoms out, it effectively lifts the wheels off the ground, and therefore you have no steering, you have no traction, and you really become a passenger. Because it's such a high-speed section of the racetrack, the momentum just took him all the way through the gravel trap and into the wall.
Yeah, and Ocon out of the car, back into the medical car. That was Laura Muller you heard on the radio there, Esteban Ocon's race engineer for this season. At a track Ocon knows quite well. Got his first podium here in Bahrain back in the Sakir Grand Prix in his Renault days. Finished second on the road in his Renault, and that will be a tough pill to swallow for Haas. So one car down then, and that puts everybody on the back foot. It was Tsunoda who was in the middle of setting his flying lap, so that will be at a detriment to him using up those tyres. Everybody else on their out laps in the early stages, but with a red flag in qualifying, the clock does stop, so we are frozen on 11 minutes and 1 second while the clean-up operation begins. On board, it looked like actually a fairly soft hit, but when you see the damage that causes, you know, that could well be a pit lane start for Esteban Ocon tomorrow.
Yeah, I mean, given that their pace, I mean, because they're into the second part of qualifying, there's an argument to say that you might want to get it rebuilt and take your grid slot of sort of P15 as opposed to going right from the back. But of course, the alternative is you do take the car out of Parc Fermé. When you rebuild it, you completely change the setup and set it up much more towards a race setup where you can look after tyres and bring the advantages in from that side of things. Start from the pit lane on a circuit where you can overtake, and perhaps that's the way that they'll approach this.
Well, a red flag out then for a crash for Esteban Ocon. He is okay, and out of the car is the Frenchman who had a best qualifying here of 7th spot in previous times. And I have to say, look, we're looking at pictures of his stricken Haas and bits falling off of the rear end of that car, the entire wing destroyed.
It's always such a sorry sight, isn't it, when there's fluids pouring out, bits dangling off it, and gravel pouring out of every orifice. It's just swinging around like a piece of trash off a crane right now.
When you're getting that back to the garage as a mechanic, what are you even thinking now when you're looking at it on the pictures?
From the very second you see it go in, it's a sinking feeling, because it just translates into hard work.
Dinner's off tonight, guys.
Exactly right. It's but as I said, when you're a backmarker team, although the workload ramps up through the roof, the opportunity, might be one that's worth taking. As I said, a pit lane start with a completely fresh setup that's not compromised as everyone else will be for setting the car up for qualifying and the race. You can tailor a car setup entirely for the race, and that's a very different way of approaching things. So it's not all bad news, I guess.
Just having another look at Esteban Ocon's crash, flicks it into the left-hander of turn 2. You do run out wide there. He was already struggling with the car, actually, before he even went onto the curb.
Yeah, you're right. Had a snap, didn't he? Snap of oversteer just approaching the corner.
And red flag. That's for Ocon off exit turn 2. So I just nearly lost it.
I don't know if the wind direction might have slightly changed as well. Maybe that might have a factor, although that Sauber is quite a handful at the best of times, even if there's wind or no wind for Nico Hülkenberg. But red flag out for the crashed Haas of Esteban Ocon.
It's a really tricky one because you want to get on the throttle there as early as you possibly can, obviously, and you don't want to lift off for turn 2 because, you want to carry as much speed as you can up the straight to turn 4. So it was always tempting just to keep your foot in that little extra bit. And of course, qualifying is all about finding those fine margins, just pushing the edge as much as you can. And it doesn't happen that often, but when it happens, it's a costly error. And that's what Ocon's done. As we were just saying, he's gone just too quickly out on the exit of turn 2. Too much throttle through there. It's got a snap on the exit. That's pushed him onto the curve. Turn 3, and that's spat him round across the track and into the barrier on the other side, and the Haas is a bit of a sorry sight. It's actually, if you remember, Nikita Mazepin had an accident there in another Haas a few years ago, very similar idea.
Was that during the race?
I think it was, yeah. Here's Hülkenberg's. Oh, yes, he's done exactly the same thing. Yeah. Just watching a replay of him. Exactly the same. Wobble on the exit of 2, gets onto the curb, but Nico Hülkenberg manages to keep it together.
Just about. So it's interesting on the race director's notes coming into this weekend that they did declare a removal of the curb on the right-hand side of turn 2, but not enough to prevent Esteban Ocon from losing it and flying into the wall. He is okay, the car not so much. That will be a bit of a rebuild job for Haas over the evening into the night. We are about to get going again in less than a minute for the green light to come on at the end of the pit lane to resume Q2 running, and really everybody's on the back foot now with 11 minutes on the clock. 15 drivers initially taking part. That is now down to 14, so safe to say that allows one person at least to get through into the top 10 safer than usual.
Yeah, and so with 11 minutes you can get 2 runs in, but what you don't want to be is stuck at the back of this train having to fight for position, go slowly to give yourself a gap. You want to be at the front where you can really go for it, push, get a solid out lap, prep your tyres, and then do a flying lap, and if you need to, have the opportunity to go again. But it's going to be tight for those further back in the field to get a clear second run in. So it's all about finding your position early on in this out lap, I'd say.
Well, they're all parked in the pit lane waiting for that green light to come on. The 2 Mercedes of Antonelli and Russell, the 2 Red Bulls of Tsunoda and Verstappen, the 2 Ferraris, Hamilton and Leclerc, the 2 McLarens, Norris and Piastri, Hadjar in the Racing Bulls, Sainz in the Williams, Alonso's Aston Martin, and the 2 Alpines of Doohan and Gasly, who looked very quick in Q1. Let's see if they can carry that pace forward, as it's the 2 Mercedes who head the field out onto the circuits as we get Q2, I should say, back underway with 10 minutes and 30 seconds remain. Now I wonder, is Tsunoda the big loser in this, because he was in the middle of his flying lap on the soft tyre, whereas nobody else really was. I think they were all on out laps before the red flag came in, so I just wonder if he's already tarnished a set of tyres now.
Well, he'll have certainly done that. I guess depending on how good the lap was shaping up, it will affect his confidence. If it was a good lap, he can carry that into this run. He's got to do more of the same. If it was a bad lap, it's another one of those things that just plays on your mind, and you're now more hyper aware of it going into another lap, which often means you then compromise the lap to make sure you don't make the same sort of mistakes again. So he's a driver under pressure, as they all are, but perhaps him in a spotlight a little bit brighter than some others around the track at the moment.
Qualified 11th here last year, did Tsunoda. He'll be hoping to get himself into the top 10 in a Red Bull rather than a Racing Bulls or an RB as they were known last year. Meanwhile, his old teammate Isaac Hadjar has been looking quick, got his first points on the board last time out in Japan, and looking rather best of the rest when it comes to firstly the rookies, but also that midfield pack.
Yeah, I've been very impressed with Isaac Hadjar. He had that really disappointing opener to his career with the disappointing outlap to the grid in Australia, where he never even made the race start. So
all you need is a hug from Anthony Hamilton, yeah, exactly. And that's the boost for your season.
Well, it's worked wonders because he's shown incredible resilience from that moment on to bounce back in a really solid way. It would be really easy to sort of keep your head under the parapet, you know, hide away from the radar and just sort of play things very safe, but he hasn't done that. He's pushed, he's been more than a match from his teammate Liam Lawson, who's a little bit more experienced, and he has been the guy that's been flying the flag for that team, and it seems like that's the same again today.
I think he is a bit of a surprise as well this season. I think he was a bit of a call-up last minute as a result of the Lawson-Tsunoda Red Bull situation, so good to see Isaac Hadjar performing well. Let's see how he goes in Q2. Kimi Antonelli is out on track at the moment, looking quick when he's not revising for his final exams. He's driving Formula One cars in the Mercedes. He was quickest in the first sector, but that has just been taken away by his teammate George Russell, who has looked so far like the next best after the McLaren drivers. Let's see if they can find a little something extra to see if they can throw a spanner into the papaya party.
Yeah, so in practice earlier on, that little something extra was about half a second. In the first part of qualifying, it was considerably less than that. 2 or 3 tenths they're looking for now, which is still a big chunk of time. But you get everything right on a circuit like this. If you hook it all up and get, you know, no mistakes, maximise everything, you can find yourself jumping 2 or 3 places up. So Antonelli and Russell, the two of the sort of main characters in this particular show, the first to come across the line and to complete laps, coming through the final sector now. The Antonelli first, out of the final corner he goes, and down towards the line, fastest middle sector of anybody, and he goes quickest so far with a 1:31.178.
Would have given Charles Leclerc a nice little tow as well in the Ferrari. Let's see though what George Russell can do as he comes across the line. Not as quick as Antonelli, slots himself up into second, about 3 tenths back from his teammate. Just worth noting, the pit lane incident involving Antonelli and Russell noted that's for failing to follow race directions and instructions, leaving the garage before the resumption time announced. So we'll see if that one becomes a problem for the two Mercedes drivers. Sainz pops himself up in the Williams into second spot.
Yeah, if that is the case, that's a sort of unusual error by Mercedes and Ron Meadows in the pit wall, who tends to look after those sort of things. The race director gives you a sort of instruction in the pre-race notes, and it clearly says you can't leave the garage until they've announced when the session is going to resume. We all get that message on our screens, as they do, and it looks like they may have emerged out of the garage in desperation to get there first ahead of that announcement.
Norris to the top of the times, and interestingly, Verstappen was on a decent lap and then comes into the pits right at the end of it, so I wonder if he made a mistake in that final corner. Meanwhile, Piastri a 10th clear of his teammate at the top. The McLarens are leading this Q2 session. It's Piastri a 10th ahead of a teammate Norris, and then comes 7 tenths to Kimi Antonelli's Mercedes, and it's Sainz, Russell the top 5, Gasly and Hulkenberg the top 7. Those are the cars with lap time so far. Let's see what Charles Leclerc can do. He got a good bit of tow from Antonelli's Mercedes at the start of his lap and had a strong final sector to put himself up into third, but that's still 6 tenths behind the leading McLaren. The gap is there.
It's a huge gap, isn't it? Interestingly, yeah, Verstappen aborted his lap, so did Lewis Hamilton as well. Just coming out the final corner, back into the pits, they get a fresh set of tyres, and they've still got 5 minutes just over on the clock, so enough time to go and do another run, but something not quite happy in the cars of both of those two drivers. So There is now just one opportunity for Hamilton and for Verstappen to get a decent time on the board and find their way inside the top 10.
Doohan and Gasly are inside the top 10 at the moment. Jack Doohan ahead of his more experienced teammate. Doohan with experience around this track in more recent times during his Formula 2 running. And could they give Flavio Briatore a wonderful 75th birthday present today by getting 2 Alpines inside that top 10?
Yeah, I mean, it's going to be tight, isn't it? Because Gasly in P8, yes, you've got Hülkenberg, you'd imagine may not hang on there once you get Verstappen and Hamilton back out. Even Hadjar not yet set a time. You'd imagine that he could probably find his way up inside the top 10. So it could even be George Russell that's, on the cusp. He's on an outlap again now, having another run at it. But he's got work to do if he wants to match his teammate and get through into the final part of qualifying.
So Verstappen then leaving himself really with just one run at the end. Hadjar locked up on his run, so he's only left himself with one final flyer. Alonso is down there in 14th in the pits, and Tsunoda will only have one run in this session now after that red flag for Esteban Ocon's Haas. Tsunoda now out onto the circuit with 4 minutes left on the clock. At risk of elimination, it's Verstappen, Hadjar, Ocon, who will be eliminated. He's out of this session already, causing the red flag with that crash. He is okay and out of the car. Alonso's down in 14th, Tsunoda in 15th. None of them with lap times on the board yet, with 3 minutes and 46 on the clock.
And with those 5 drivers still to set a lap time because of either mistakes, running wide, locking tyres, or just not happy with their car, the likes of Hülkenberg, who has got a lap on the board, albeit 1.2 seconds off the time of the lead McLaren in Oscar Piastri, he has got a lap on the board and those other guys haven't. So the pressure's now on a number of those other drivers. It puts Hülkenberg in a position where he could even find his way into the final part of qualifying. Unlikely, but it could happen.
Well, as the surroundings grow darker, as we head into the night, the track, this Bahrain International Circuit, over 5.4 kilometres, illuminated by floodlights. As the light bounces off the silver arrow of the Mercedes, George Russell gearing up for his final flyer in this second part of qualifying, where we'll look to eliminate the slowest 5 drivers out of the 14 that remain. Esteban Ocon's Haas will be out of this session, having crashed out in the early stages. A red flag caused for him. The car, not good. He was able to walk away and now in the medical centre getting his checks. But Russell then embarking up to over 260 kilometres an hour as he heads towards the right-hander of turn 4.
Yeah, and the pressure's really on these 5 drivers who've still got to set a lap. Obviously, they've got to get a clean lap on the board, and they need to make it a quick one if they want to find their way towards the top. But they're at high risk now of a yellow flag situation ruining any of those laps, and there won't be time to go again. Even a red flag, with only 2 minutes on the clock now, you're not going to get another attempt at this. So it is now or never for Hamilton, Verstappen, Hadjar, Alonso and Tsunoda.
I do wonder if Red Bull are really putting the pressure on Tsunoda to perform here, when maybe there were other options on the table. He's a 10th down on Piastri though, but that's okay for being a 10th down on a McLaren. That's in sector 1. We'll see how that pans out between Russell, who's out there at the moment, Hamilton going again. We'll see what Verstappen's got as well. He's coming through the middle part of sector 1 at the moment, not lighting up the timing screens, it has to be said. Russell through the middle sector, 3/10 down on Oscar Piastri. He will come across the line. Russell, who's down in 7th at the moment, looking to improve. His teammate Kimi Antonelli has come alive under the lights in qualifying tonight and just crossed the line up into 3rd spot for the Italian rookie. What has his more experienced teammate got, who hugs that inside line and puts himself up into 2nd, 2/10 adrift from the leading McLaren.
Yeah, that's decent from George Russell, under pressure as we said, but also very, very good from Antonelli, with just a few hundredths between the 2 Mercedes drivers. Tsunoda up to P6, but 7/10 off the lead McLaren of Piastri, so still a long way off. And here comes Hamilton in the Ferrari.
Let's see what he's got. Hamilton up to 5th, half a second adrift. It's Piastri, Norris, Russell, Antonelli, then Hamilton the top 5. Gasly's lighting up the middle sector. The Alpines could really cause some pain for the likes of Yuki Tsunoda here. Hadjar can't pip Tsunoda in the Red Bull, but it's a decent effort for the young French rookie in the Racing Bulls. He slots himself into 8th and through for the time being. Doohan needs to put in a better lap, so too Hülkenberg, but we await lap times from Verstappen Verstappen and Fernando Alonso. It's Gasly up to third in the Alpine. Impressive stuff from him. Jack Doohan's coming through the middle sector now. We'll see what his Australian rookie teammate has got. Where does Verstappen lie in the Red Bull? It's only 7th for Verstappen. That puts Tsunoda down to 9th. Tsunoda could be in trouble here with some electric laps in the end from the likes of Fernando Alonso. Could he spoil the party here? He hasn't looked like he's at the pace all week for Q3, but let's see what he can pull out from that Aston Martin. And don't rule out Carlos Sainz either. Alonso in the end only enough for 14th. Sainz has looked quick. He could make pain for Isaac Hadjar. Sainz in the Williams across the line. What's it going to be? Up to 6th for the Spanish racer. Actually lost time in that final sector. Hadjar's out of this one. We're still waiting for Jack Doohan to come across the line, and Nico Hülkenberg too. They could pip Yuki Tsunoda, and Charles Leclerc needs to find time as well, who's down in 9th. Can Hülkenberg do anything? No. Takes the flag in 13th. What about Jack Doohan looking to spoil Tsunoda's party here? He can't do it after showing such promise. Doohan out in 11th, and that will keep Tsunoda safe and Charles Leclerc, who's going to finish his lap off anyway. But it was getting rather tight for the Monegascan, the Ferrari, who goes across the line and finds the time and ends up 6th fastest. And that will be that at the end of Q2, where it all got rather close. But it's Jack Doohan who couldn't quite make it through in 11th. Then Hadjar out in 12th, Hülkenberg 13th, ahead of Fernando Alonso, and Esteban Ocon, having crashed out at the start of the session, 15th.
Oh, unbelievably bad luck for Jack Doohan. 17 1,000ths of a second. That's all it was. That's all that was the difference between him getting through and not. Whilst his teammate Gasly up in P3, 0.189 behind the McLarens.
Good job today. Maximized. Thank you, guys.
Maximised for Fernando Alonso. Unfortunately, it's only 14th.
Yeah, not enough. Hulkenberg ahead of him, in fact. Hulkenberg in the Sauber, and that's not where Alonso wants to be, behind a Sauber, with no disrespect to that team. Let's hear from Hulkenberg.
Yeah, we'll take that over 14. Oh, wait. Yes, we will. Nice work. Thank you, guys.
That's exactly what I'm talking about. You'd imagine Hulkenberg, with Ocon already crashed out, he'd have been looking at P14 all day long out of that session. So to find himself ahead of an Aston Martin, particularly one being driven by Fernando Alonso, that's a really good effort, I think, from the Hulk.
That's a shame for Jack Doohan, though, but it is still his career best start in Formula One. So if we try and find the brightness there, his teammate sailed on through, ended up 3rd in the end. His experience there, the rising factor there for Doohan, who could only manage 11th. Hadjar, it's actually his lowest start of the season in 12th. That shows what a rocket ship that Racing Bulls has been in qualifying. 13th for Hülkenberg. That's his second Q2 appearance of the season, and once again out qualifying his teammate Gabriel Bortoleto. Fernando Alonso left languishing down in 14th, and the slowest of the runners able to complete a lap, with Esteban Ocon out in 15th. Whether he will start there or not, we shall see, with heavy damage to that Haas car. They might elect for a pit lane start tomorrow. We will keep you up to date with all of that. Now, I'll tell you what, Mark, just looking at those Red Bulls who finished 9th and 10th, Verstappen only 2/10 ahead of Tsunoda, so I'd actually say that's pretty good going for Tsunoda at least. But the bigger issue here is that Red Bull seem to be in trouble.
Yeah, they're not happy at all. You know, even if you discount the Tsunoda issues, you always look at Verstappen, don't you, for a sort of steer on just how good that is. Just before we come back to that, we're looking at the Mercedes coming out of the garage, and even the guys in the Sauber pit wall looking at the two cars coming down the pit lane, thinking,
We don't have an official restart time yet.
Yeah, that's what I thought. Mercedes is dodgy.
exactly that.
Yeah, we think they are wrong.
Yeah, exactly that. So Mercedes clearly coming out of the garage before the official restart time, which is denoted in the race director's pre-event notes. And normally that will be a slam dunk. There's no question really over whether you broke those rules or not. It'll go to the stewards. They will have a variety of options available to them as to how they deal with it. But it will include penalties.
Yeah, I don't think I've seen that before. in Formula One?
Well, going against race directors' notes is normally things like driving around bollards. If you go off the circuit, the race director might say if you go off at turn 2, you have to come back onto the circuit via a bollard that they've placed there. And if you don't follow those instructions, because a lot of those instructions are centred around safety, this one being a procedural one, but either way, it looks at least like a breach of those instructions. So I wouldn't be too surprised if it results in a penalty, which seems harsh, but, you know, rules is rules.
Rules is rules. That's the voice of the former McLaren mechanic, Martin Priestley, alongside myself, Harry Benjamin. We've also got the BBC's F1 correspondent, Andrew Benson, here. We are about to go into the final part of qualifying, the top 10 shootout, the fight for pole position. And it looks like it's advantage McLaren, and Red Bull should be rather worried about that.
They're in all sorts of trouble, Red Bull, compared to McLaren. But I just want to know, Mark, did Ron Dennis make you read the sporting regulations and memorise them?
He didn't force it, but I think it'd be frowned upon.
Mark's a goody two-shoes. So.
Yeah, there's nothing better than a good Saturday night reading than the sporting regulations, I can tell you. I would say, though, that as a breach of the race director's instructions there, it seems like a harsh and almost a nothing thing that they came out a few seconds early. But the reality is, it put them at the front of that queue. And as we touched on earlier on, there is a sporting advantage to doing that. So that's why it probably will result in some kind of penalty enforcement.
Well, we'll keep you up to date with that. Q3 is going to start at 7:57 local time, so in a few minutes' time. Where did it all go wrong for Isaac Hadjar? Out in 12th. We're just having a little look around the final corner for the Racing Bulls, and that all looked fine. Was this the setup to a flying lap? Did he lock up into turn 1? Oh, it's just showcasing his frustration as he whacks his helmet, crossing the line, knocked out in Q2.
Yeah, he's an emotional character, isn't he, this guy? But you know, that's good. That's what we want to see. He's fully invested in this, and he's shown such promise. I think it's similar with Jack Doohan, right? The reason he's so frustrated with getting P11 is that the promise has been there in this qualifying hour. He's shown enough pace to match his teammate in Gasly, even beat him, and to see the sister car actually as close as anyone's been to a McLaren all weekend, just over a tenth away. I think he's got every right to feel a little bit disappointed with that. Yeah,
after back-to-back top 7 qualifyings for Isaac Hadjar. His worst qualifying was actually for the sprint in China, so we kind of ignore that for the stats, but 15th there, and then Australia, he qualified 11th, which if you take out the old formation lap spin into the barrier for Hadjar, it's been a pretty strong start to the year, and certainly laid down a marker to Red Bull at least. And if he continues to outpace Liam Lawson, who is more experienced, albeit obviously recovering from a pretty fraught time in the top team, but this is good going for Isaac Hadjar.
Well, it's no secret that they still haven't found the perfect second driver in the Red Bull team. They haven't found the perfect replacement or the perfect teammate for Max Verstappen. That's no disrespect to Yuki Tsunoda. He may well grow into that, but the door's still open for anyone on that Red Bull junior program, and he's the next in line, and certainly with his foot halfway between that door. So yeah, he's got an opportunity and he's making the most of it. Just looking at the two McLarens, they still have a comfortable advantage out front, but the real interest for me is going to be between the two McLaren drivers. And at the end of that second part of qualifying, it's Piastri just with his nose in front, and this matters. Whoever gets pole position, yes, it's not the end of you don't win the race from there necessarily, but it does matter. It matters first of all with the sort of bragging rights with inside the garage, the confidence levels that come with it, but it also could matter when it comes to race strategy, because the guy who's in front out of your two teammates will get the preferential strategy when it comes to pit stops during the Grand Prix.
Yuki Tsunoda heads out of his Red Bull garage, followed by his teammate Max Verstappen, and heads down towards the end of the pit lane to be given the green light, which is yet to come on. It will do in about 30 seconds time. For 12 minutes left of running as we set the grid for the top 10 ahead of the Bahrain Grand Prix. Just at the end of that Q2 session, Carlos Sainz ended up in 7th in the Williams. Good to see him looking like he's feeling more comfortable in that Williams, recapturing some form.
Yeah, because no one doubts the talent of Carlos Sainz, but he's going to take some time, as any of the drivers that move teams, same with Lewis Hamilton at Ferrari. It's going to take some time not only to get used to the car, but the way of working with the engineers, the systems that the team uses, even the culture within some of these organisations. So you've got to expect it's not just going to be drop a great talent into any car and get the best results. It's going to take some time, but these little wins that he's having over his teammate, and this is the first one really where we've really seen it, because Albon's been a tough opponent inside the sister Williams, so to have Carlos Sainz outperform him today, I think will do wonders for his confidence inside that car.
Green light on at the end of the pit lane. Q3 is underway with 11 minutes and 33, 32, 31 seconds remaining, and it is the two Red Bulls who lead the remaining cars out. First time we've got two Red Bulls in Q3 this season as Tsunoda skates through, but I think Red Bull are looking rather shaky with Verstappen only a couple of tenths ahead of Tsunoda, but at the end of Q2 they were down in 9th and 10th. It's advantage McLaren. We think the fight for pole is between Oscar Piastri and Lando Norris. Behind them, though, it's up for grabs. The Mercedes look strong, both Russell and Antonelli. We've got the two Ferraris in there as well, with Lewis Hamilton and Charles Leclerc. And what about Pierre Gasly in the Alpine, or Carlos Sainz in the sole remaining Williams? Could they spring a midfield surprise? Gasly ended Q2 in third. He's gone well around this track in the past and will be chomping at the bit for a good result to deliver for Alpine.
Absolutely right, and the conditions still changing a little bit. Wind speed has dropped again quite considerably, back to sort of where it was in practice earlier on today. Temperature dropping all of the time, the circuit rubbering in, so the conditions that these guys are driving in are shifting, not by a huge amount, but enough to transform the performance of some of these cars, and it could swing towards your car's performance or it could swing against it, and that's why we're seeing these sort of shifts up and down the grid. If you can nail a lap, if you can get every single thing right around the 15 turns of this brilliant circuit, you could find yourself with a decent chunk of lap time and therefore quite a few grid slots further up.
We're at the Bahrain International Circuit, qualifying ahead of the Bahrain Grand Prix on Sunday afternoon. You can hear that with the race starting at 4 o'clock on 5 Sports Extra, build up from 3:45 in the afternoon on Sunday. But here in the middle of the desert, surrounded by floodlights, with the nighttime sky overlooking the 10 remaining cars, battling it out for their best lap times possible. It's two Red Bulls of Tsunoda and Verstappen, two McLarens of Piastri and Norris, two Mercedes of Russell and Antonelli, two Ferraris of Leclerc and Hamilton, with the sole remaining Williams of Carlos Sainz and Pierre Gasly in for the ride as well. Let's see what happens over the course of the next 9 minutes and 14 seconds. Tsunoda on his first flying lap now through the left-hander of turn 10. Easy on the throttle. The DRS flies open down the back straight, getting up to speeds of almost 300 kilometers an hour. North of that, as he slings it through the left-hander of turn 11, then approaches the fastest corner on the track, 245 kilometers per hour through the right-hand sweeper of turn 12, bumping onto the asphalt as sparks fly from the underside of that Red Bull. He flashes through the right-hander of turn 13. That feeds him out down the final straight towards the final two corners. It's a right-hander of turn 14. Then it's a slight kink taken flat out of 15th. Don't run out wide. It's so easy to drag the car out there and you lose your lap time. Tsunoda keeps it neat and tidy, and his first lap time on the board is a 1:31.637, and he's actually quicker than Max Verstappen, who's crossing the line now. Verstappen fastest in the final sector, but at the end of the first runs in Q3, it's Tsunoda with the advantage.
Yeah, Tsunoda quicker all the way around that lap, right until that final sector. I do wonder if he stepped across track limits. I thought I saw a glimpse of it earlier on in the first sector. I can't be sure. We'll keep an eye on the screens and let you know, but he was mighty close.
On the limits in these final laps, George Russell's looking quick in the first and middle sectors, fastest of anybody as Kimi Antonelli goes to the top of the times by a tenth and a half with a 1:31.4. Sainz crosses the line third.
My brakes are just terrible. I can't brake at all.
So bad.
Now, this is unusual to hear Max Verstappen's dissatisfaction with his car at this stage of the weekend. Normally you hear it all through practice, and Red Bull and Verstappen then work wonders to turn it around for qualifying. It doesn't seem like it's the case here, with him currently down in 6th as Russell goes fastest. Gasly slots into 4th, ahead of Sainz, as we await the 2 McLarens and the 2 Ferraris.
Yeah, that's not a happy Max Verstappen, is it? And I don't think I can remember the last time Verstappen was consistently behind a teammate, no matter who that teammate was, for many, many years, in fact. We're going to see the McLarens, though, because Lando Norris is now on a flying lap and has gone quicker than anybody else in the first sector. Piastri quicker than anyone else in the middle sector. This is going to be a shootout between the 2 papaya cars. But before that, we're going to get Leclerc crossing the line in a Ferrari.
George Russell is a second clear of Lewis Hamilton and 1.1 clear of his teammate Kimi Antonelli. Leclerc gets closer, 9/10 of a second. Russell still heads the field. The 2 McLarens are looking quicker, but this is good work from George Russell's Mercedes as Piastri goes up to the P1 spot, just a 10th clear of Russell, who has managed to split the McLarens in these early stages. It's Piastri ahead of Russell, then comes Norris. The next quickest car after that is Charles Leclerc, who is 1.1 seconds away.
So, old and new tyres, Harry. Old tyres on Piastri's and Norris's cars, new tyres on Russell's Mercedes, old tyres on Leclerc and Hamilton's Ferraris, new tyres on Antonelli.
So that would explain the split for George Russell getting up there, but it's still a good lap to get in there. At the end of the first runs then, it's Piastri on provisional pole ahead of George Russell, then Lando Norris, Charles Leclerc 4th ahead of Lewis Hamilton, Kimi Antonelli the top 6 ahead of Yuki Tsunoda, then it's Pierre Gasly 8th, Carlos Sainz 9th, and Max Verstappen, who rounds out the top 10.
Yeah, and Verstappen just saw a replay at the exit of the entry to turn 4. I think he locked a brake. Certainly struggled with the braking, as we heard him say on the radio, and then ran wide as a result of that. So first of all, I'm surprised his lap time hasn't been deleted, because I'm sure he crossed the line with all 4 wheels. But
they need you in the stewards room, Mark.
but certainly not happy. I feel like the class snitch.
Yeah, like the referee. All right, don't say it so loudly. 5 minutes and 14 seconds remaining.
Antonelli just had his lap time deleted.
And Hulkenberg has... Oh, well, that's an old one. Hulkenberg's not in the top 10. Antonelli has had his lap time deleted. So he will fall down the order. They will get another go at it with 5 minutes left on the clock. Everybody will come into the pits at this stage for a lull, a change of tyres ahead of one final flyer. And I'm expecting to see everybody out there on track again. Such are the fine margins out there. There could be some really big results up for grabs for the likes of Pierre Gasly and Carlos Sainz, with Red Bull struggling and with mainstream drivers and top teams not able to deliver a lap time and keep it if they're running wide for track limits.
Yeah, absolutely right. It's about not making mistakes when this pressure ramps up in the last 4 minutes or so of this session to set the top 10 grid order. Hamilton also having a lap time deleted as well at turn 13. So Hamilton not as happy as his teammate in terms of lap time, not very far behind, but stepping over the white lines, and he's had that deleted as well. So more work to do, and I think the stewards are probably churning their way through a number of these. This is a circuit that really does try and, as I said earlier on, pull you out across that white line. Such of the nature of some of the corners here, with no walls, as you know, very close to the edge of the circuit. It just encourages the drivers to really push harder and harder. But either way, impressive stuff from George Russell to split those 2 McLarens, because although they're on a different type of tyre, that's the first time anyone's been able to do it all weekend.
Just looking at where the lap times were deleted for Antonelli and Hamilton. Antonelli turn 11, Hamilton turn 13. As we get back underway for the final 3.5 minutes. Well, we never stopped, but they all did. They came into the pits to change their tyres and have a little drink and a refuel, and off we go again. It's currently Oscar Piastri on provisional pole with a 1:32.33. We're expecting pole to be a vicious fight between the 2 McLarens of Piastri and his teammate Lando Norris. Could George Russell continue to spring a surprise? There's a tyre deficit after these first runs, which explains Russell splitting the 2 McLarens, but anything can happen in these last 3 minutes. A yellow flag, a red flag, and suddenly that lap time becomes crucial for the likes of George Russell. The two Ferraris struggling. Hamilton will only have one final flyer after his lap time deleted to get himself a better grid spot. So too for Kimi Antonelli. Can Max Verstappen fix his brake issues that he's struggling with? Really off-colour qualifying so far for the reigning champion. His teammate after the first runs was quicker than him, Yuki Tsunoda. It only is second qualifying for Red Bull. He's currently up there in fifth with the outliers of Pierre Gasly in the Alpine and the Williams of Carlos Sainz ready to strike if the bigger teams fall at any hurdles across the way.
Yeah, and just looking at the two McLarens, as we heard, on used tyres for that run, and it just shows the advantage they do have, because this is a circuit that is limited by what performance you can get out of your tyres, managing the temperature around the entirety of the lap, and a brand new set of tyres should in theory give them at least another 2.5 to 3 tenths of lap time around this circuit. That's kind of the gap that I'm expecting we might see between McLaren and the rest. So the biggest question, if they can get that right, those two McLaren drivers, which one of them is going to get it more right than the other? And that is a really interesting battle for me.
Here we go then, 1 minute and 41 left on the clock. Kimi Antonelli will be the first car round the final two corners to embark out of the top teams on his final flyer. Under pressure is the Italian rookie to deliver one lap. His first one got deleted due to track limits down at turn 11. He'll be a little more cautious going through that corner, but will not want to lose any time. Makes it through turn 1. The left-hand king of turn 2 comes, rides across the curves. That's where we saw Esteban Ocon's Haas fly into the wall in Q2. No such case for Kimi Antonelli, who widens the line and the turning point for the right-hander of turn 4. Runs out wide, but still keeps two tyres on the right side of the white line into the sweeping 5 and 6 before he then heads downhill into the right-hand braking zone of turn 8. Rises back uphill as the light glints off of the silver arrows. It's a decent first sector for Antonelli, but his teammate George Russell is currently fastest of anybody in the first sector and up on Piastri's time in the first laps. Antonelli down the middle straight now with the DRS aid.
Yeah, we're watching an onboard from Antonelli, and it actually looks really quite under control, nice and tidy. He's not quite as quick as his teammate in the sister car from George Russell, but this is a young kid, just 18 years of age, under massive pressure here. And so far, as he comes through into the final sector of the lap, nice and tidy, not put a foot wrong, maybe a little bit too conservative. That might be the big question when we get to the end and see a lap time. His teammate, though, Russell, pushing very, very hard, has gone purple in the first two sectors.
Neat and tidy indeed from Kimi Antonelli. Let's see what it is to the line as the Italian goes provisional pole by 20 thousandths of a second. It's a 1:32.13. That's what Antonelli has got, but his teammate is going quicker. George Russell, a track he made his debut at with Mercedes, finds more time and takes away that provisional pole position by 0.2 of a second. What have the Ferraris got to offer? Lewis Hamilton could only manage fifth. He can't beat the McLarens even when they have been on used older tyres. His teammate Charles Leclerc can, though, rockets up onto the front row in second. We're still waiting to see what the two McLarens have got, but Norris is down on time on Russell in the first sector. Gasly up to fourth in the Alpine behind Antonelli. Hamilton's now down to seventh. We're still looking for Tsunoda, Sainz, Verstappen, Norris and Piastri. Max Verstappen struggling with brake issues. He's currently 10th and last in this Q3 session. What's he got across the line? It's only enough for 7th. He could be beaten here. Let's see what goes on as he fumbles down the order. Piastri's looking quick in the middle sector. Piastri going for a second pole position this season, a second career pole to the top. Pole position under the lights for Piastri. Can he hold it? Can Lando Norris bring anything to the game? No! Norris fails at the final hurdle and he cannot improve on 6th. That is a disaster for the Brit. Carlos Sainz crosses the line in 8th and Yuki Tsunoda's not finding any time either. I wonder if he's made a mistake. He will end up 10th and last. That is qualifying under the lights in Bahrain, and the star that shines the brightest is Oscar Piastri on pole position for the Bahrain Grand Prix.
Well, I'm not at all surprised that Piastri's on pole position, but I'm very, very surprised that his teammate is not tucked up right behind him, and it is the silver Mercedes of George Russell. Let's not forget, there's a potential investigation still underway with the two Mercedes cars. Let's hear from Piastri first.
That's P1, Oscar, P1.
Yeah, baby. Nice work. Very nice work. Thanks, Rob.
That is a really solid job from Piastri. We talked about the importance of it, not just for getting the pole position, but what that might mean when it comes to race strategy and just clawing Piastri's way back into this fight between the two McLaren drivers, which will mean so much inside that team. You don't want to get left behind in the early part of this season, and that will be a good way to start clawing that. Lando Norris down in sixth, only just one place ahead of Max Verstappen, massively struggling.
It's moments like this that could define how the championship pans out.
Very true. Yeah, totally right. And we haven't seen Norris's lap in its entirety, so he's clearly made some kind of mistake because the car was way, way quicker than the lap time that it eventually delivered. He should not be behind a Gasly and just in front of a Verstappen at this point. Here's Gasly.
Amazing.
Pierre Gasly, fifth place in the Alpine. That is incredible, having only had a best qualifying of 9th so far this year, followed by a 16th and an 11th place. That is some uprise from the Alpine driver. George Russell will be happy with second, inheriting that really. Norris couldn't get it together for whatever reason. We haven't seen if he made a mistake or what, and Charles Leclerc, big beneficiary for him, in third in the Ferrari that's looked distant from even the Mercedes at times this weekend.
Yeah, the crumb of comfort that Lando will take from that is that he's got a very fast car, even in race trim, and this is a circuit that you can overtake on. But the downside is, of course, first of all, he's starting quite some way back from his teammate, handing the advantage to Piastri. Secondly, he's in the middle of that top 10 pack, and we know what can happen when you get caught up in amongst the midfield runners. Anything can happen, particularly in the opening lap. It can be chaos. Lando Norris is going to have to be very, very careful of that.
Second career Grand Prix pole for Oscar Piastri, setting it in fine style as he gets out of his McLaren in Parc Fermé, ahead of George Russell, Charles Leclerc third, Kimi Antonelli fourth, with Pierre Gasly the top five. Lando Norris only sixth, ahead of Max Verstappen in seventh. We're just about to get another look at where it went wrong for Lando Norris out of turn one. The rear sliding, the wheel spin costing him a little bit of time. Was it enough? About, what, 12,000ths of a second lost, and in the end he said a 132.67 compared to his teammate a 129.8, so a few tenths off. It wasn't all lost in turn one.
No, he said one of the big advantages was the McLaren looking after its tyre temperature, and it seemed like it got the better of Lando Norris, didn't it? Maybe overheating those rears, spinning those rear wheels up, losing lap time, but overheating them further. So, yeah, something went awry there on a circuit and in a session when the two McLarens should have been night and day ahead of everybody else. They've somehow blundered it with one of their cars.
I mean, the fact we've got the likes of Norris in sixth, Verstappen in seventh, we're going to get some more overtaking tomorrow than we did last week, right?
Yeah,
come on, Mark,
please. Of course we are. I mean, look, whenever you get a very fast car, and Lando's car is a very fast car, when it's out of position and the circuit enables overtaking, which this one definitely does, we're going to see movement. You might find that some of those other cars come alive in the race where they've struggled over one lap pace. Let's hope for Verstappen's sake that that's the case with the Red Bull. Lewis Hamilton all the way down in P9. What's his race pace going to be like on with a new floor on a car? That I guess part of that philosophy is to try and allow them to overcome this inability to run the car low. If you remember, they got disqualified for having the car running too low and wearing the skids out. So lots to look forward to.
Well, let's hear from David Coulthard talking to our drivers.
Welcome back to the top three in qualifying for Charles Leclerc. That session was very unpredictable. Did you really believe you could be in this position when you went into the session, especially looking at how strong the McLarens appeared to be?
I mean, honestly, I didn't expect P3. I knew that in Q3 there was some lap time. I knew that in Q1 and Q2 I just had to be patient and wait for the track to come towards me in Q3, which was a bit tricky because at the beginning of Q3 everything felt really bad with the old tires, but then as soon as we put the new tires it was quite a bit better. So I'm happy. I did not expect it, but I think it's a result of we explored quite a lot extreme setups in the last few weekends, and it feels like I found my way a little bit. And little by little, I hope there will be more performance to extract from this car in the weekends to come.
You had some upgrades that were brought to the car for this race weekend. Tricky conditions with the wind, the temperatures, of course, are here as well. I have to assume those upgrades are positive, and this is all part of the journey.
Yes, definitely. I mean, the team has pushed like crazy to try and bring those upgrades here. I don't think it's the best track to have these upgrades on, but it's always good. It's a small gain, but it's not a big one. But hopefully next week it should be a bit more of a step. So, but again, I think if we are P3 today, especially considering such fine margins with P4, the upgrades helped.
Well, congratulations on third place for the Grand Prix tomorrow.
Thank you.
George, second on the grid for the Grand Prix tomorrow. I think a little bit like Charles, if that was offered to you before, I know you always want to be number one, you guys, but you would have probably taken that.
Yeah, 100%. I think if anybody said we'd be within half a second of the McLarens, would have taken it, because we would have thought that would have been sort of P3 on the grid. So to be second on the grid is a bonus. Congrats to Oscar, great lap, and excited for tomorrow now.
Well, you mentioned that gap, much closer than half a second.
Yeah.
And you have the data available to you as the session unfolds. So where have the strides been made, and where is that very small gap that you need to make up?
I've got to be honest, I think the strides were being made with the nighttime coming in and the track temperature getting a little bit cooler. We saw it this morning in practice 3 when it was roasting hot. The McLarens were down the road, and now as this session unfolded, we just seem to get quicker and quicker. So yeah, lining up P2 is great chance tomorrow, but I think being realistic, it'll be a challenge to fight with Oscar.
Okay, well done in the second place anyway for tomorrow.
Cheers, guys.
And Oscar, first of all, congratulations, your 50th Grand Prix start, and it doesn't get any better than pole position. You just, I don't want to say dominated the session, but your name was at the top of the times all the way through.
Yeah, I mean, I felt confident out there pretty much all weekend, to be honest. FP1 was an experience for us all, I think. It felt more like a rally car than an F1 car, but from then on, I felt really comfortable with the car, and FP3 we had good pace, and yeah, qualifying, the others caught up a little bit closer than what I wanted, but yeah, still delivered the laps when it mattered, which was the most important thing at the end. So very, very happy.
Well, they may be closer than what you wanted, but your teammates' difficulties in qualifying is all to your benefit, because one of the big challenges we've seen is when you have two competitive drivers in two quick cars, it takes management. This maybe makes it a much clearer Grand Prix start for you tomorrow.
Let's see. I got to get to turn 1 in first. So let's see what happens. But yeah, felt like I've been comfortable all weekend, and like I said, there's no better place to start than on pole. So yeah, I can't thank the team enough for the car they've given me, and yeah, I'm excited for the race tomorrow.
Congratulations once again.
Thank you. Cheers.
Your pole sitter for the Bahrain Grand Prix, Oscar Piastri, will start alongside George Russell in second, Leclerc third, Antonelli fourth, Gasly the top 5, Norris in sixth ahead of Verstappen, Sainz, Hamilton and Tsunoda the top 10. We'll be analysing all of that in the Checkered Flag podcast, which you can hear a little later on BBC Sounds and wherever you get your pods from. My thanks to Andrew Benson, to Mark Priestley. Join us for the Bahrain Grand Prix. We'll have build-up from 3:45 in the afternoon on 5 Sports Extra ahead of Lights Out from 4 o'clock. We hope to see you then. This has been an IMG production for BBC Radio 5 Live.